Hi everyone, Pooka here. Today's minisode is put together from my interviews at the expo hall of PAX Unplugged today, where I ran around trying to find tabletop role-playing game creators whose games struck me as being Changeling adjacent, in that they were fae, dream, imagination, or similarly themed. Because the expo hall is a giant room that was filled with 10,000 people, the sound quality wasn't always great. I did my best to clean up the audio, but there's only so much one can do when one is trying to also push out the episode as quickly as possible. So I ask that you forgive any weird sound artifacts and terrible vocal quality. Nevertheless, I hope it is edifying, and with that, on with the episode.
This is Changeling the Podcast.
So I'm standing here at booth number, is this 4129, I think?
27.
27.
It's probably 4127 and 29. Right, but yeah.
The double header. So this is Imagining Games, and I'm here standing with Pete. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Pete Petrucia. I'm the creative director and the founder of Imagining Games. We won our first Emmy for Chew the Role-Playing Game this year.
Congrats.
But I have had games like Rest in Pieces that was nominated for Best Rules. That's an innovation on Dread. You play deadbeat roommates that live with the Grim Reaper. I've got my Dream Chaser game. I've wrote for Gnome Stew. I hosted the Indie Groundbreakers and, all kinds of stuff. And
Dream Chaser sounds interesting.
It's so cool. I do a lot of sales for IPR now, too, Indie Press Revolution. I'm their Midwest rep, if you will. So
nice.
That's just because I like to curate games. So,
I mean, I won't say it's a living because it isn't a living for a lot of people, but congratulations on making it a living.
Well, the goal is that you're trying to make it a living so that it's more of a model for everyone else, because we really the more ground we can keep breaking, hopefully we can keep taking people along with us, right? Because that's the dream, is that more and more of us can leave our day jobs and have some comfort in making games all day.
Yeah.
I know.
I'm going to let that thought sit quietly in one corner of my brain as I, with another, ask, so the game that caught my eye looking at some of the offerings that you have is Broken Tales.
I know you mentioned you like Fae adjacent, yeah.
Well, yeah, so are you familiar with Changeling the Dreaming
at
all?
Of course.
All right, so
I'm not so good of the different distinctions. Like, I played in the 90s, right, with the beautiful stained glass covers and when the books were full color throughout and so on.
The true game.
Yes, yeah. And I loved it, and it was so mind-bending, the duality of all. And we would play, and it's cliche to say it's something I've never gotten out of my head, right? Because the thought of living two lives with people that see both of you at the same, it's just so bizarrely beautiful and odd.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
And sometimes 25 years later, you end up starting a podcast with friends over it.
It's just so incredible.
Well, so with Broken Tales, can you tell us a little bit about that game?
So first of all credit where credit's due. I'm the North American publisher for Broken Tales. Broken Tales is actually a creation of the World Anvil Publishing. They're Italian-based. Tommaso, I'm trying to think of Tommaso's last name, runs the company over there and has been really wonderful to work with. But yeah, I fell in love with Broken Tales as a backer. The graphic design, especially stuff coming out of Italy, has been phenomenal. They've just been a strong powerhouse for graphic design, which means art. The art's been killer. Yeah. And the premise was really intriguing. So I backed it, and then when I got my copies, it's like, oh, this is really rad. I like it. It had this interesting system of you just roll. There's one mechanic. You roll a number of d6s. If you ever roll a 1, you fail. And you'll know based on the few traits in your character, how many successes you have already when you go to do the thing. The game master will be like, okay, you need 5. If you get 7, it's a better margin. You get 9, you blow it out of the water. You just choose how many more dice you want to roll, and you can roll 1 at a time or 10 at a time. And if you ever roll a 1, it all fails. So it's a tension builder. But what's the beauty of this, which leads us into the fuller scope of Broken Tales, is that it's like a one-rule game. So it's a much bigger, prettier product, something to really bite your teeth in and grab players with the look and feel of it. It's not like a zine, a lot of these games that have that kind of level of mechanics would be like a zine, but it allows everyone to really focus on the narrative. Very White Wolfy, right? We can focus on how do we describe the scene? Who are the characters? You can play your character to the fullest, living a character that has no numbers on the sheet except for how many soma points I have, and that's how many uses of your special abilities.
So is this a system that's used in other games as well, or is
It's called Monad Echo.
Okay.
It's not. I'm not very familiar because it's been coming out of Italy. I did see a little pamphlets of the rules that exist. World Anvil seems to be continuing with the system as they've let out. Dead Air Seasons is kind of like The Last of Us, or like it has some elements of like The Walking Dead, but it uses the same game system. It's the players create like a community that's dealing with some larger issue that's world affecting. Usually have something environmental. So like The Last of Us has that fungal version of a virus that creates the zombies, but it could be like the Ice Age or some kind of like solar flare that's coming. So you're not limited with Dead Air Seasons. But yeah, it's neat because they're using it again, tension building for a game where you're against all odds, you're normal people, it's kind of against you. Yeah. It's a good feel, right?
So bring us back to Broken Tales.
So sorry, yeah.
Well, just,
what is Broken Tales? Yeah.
What is it? Yeah.
Broken Tales, you play the villains from fairy tales. So you're in an 1800s like European backdrop, which is for the most part like realistic. You are almost the supernatural element that is there. A child wished for the villains in fairy tales to have redemption, and it was granted. But what happened is there is a yin and a yang to the universe, of course, right? If you love Changeling,
Natch.
All of the good characters, quote unquote, in these fairy tales, the folklore versions, not Disney. That's important.
The better versions.
So there's an abundance of these scenarios that they built these cool little frameworks of like setting scenes of Act 2. You go to this place and there's these people. What do you do? Because Pinocchio's lost their mind and you have to go to the wood shop. Or Alice was like a noblewoman who was sent to a boarding school because she was kind of a tomboy. And when she went there, this boarding school was known as kind of an asylum that was really known for almost like lobotomy stuff before lobotomies. Of course, when our ragtag group of villains from fairy tales who have forgotten why they were evil in the first place, so they're on this course of redemption, are going to go solve problems in places like an asylum full of craziness, trying to get to the bottom of what Alice has done there. But if you're the big bad wolf, and what you're good at is tearing, eating, ripping apart, it doesn't seem like there's a very good future ahead of you of staying as a good quote-unquote character, which is fun, because it's this anti-hero borderline thing. And it creates these situations that are out of this world, but I love that it's also not all fairyland.
Would you say that it's overall a hopeful game, like, from that perspective? Because in a sense, Changeling and the World of Darkness games always sold themselves as you are playing the monster, but they kind of did it to different degrees. And I find that with a lot of Changeling players in particular, it does have that hope punk kind of vibe. It's
a really interesting question that we've really talked back and forth. I really need to talk to Tommaso about like what the creative team thinks, because I would ultimately say yes. And that's because there's a really interesting little thing. There's like 6 pages in the book, maybe 8, 10, something like that, 3 spreads, kind of thing. One is like talks about the wish that started the redemption. One talks about there is like a never-ending story kind of evil. Like it's like the shadow who will not be named kind of thing. This like name for the blight, the name for the evil force in the world. And there's a secret to who that person is. And you can actually, almost like the Matrix, go through the 4th wall and your group could meet them. And they could find them in a cabin out somewhere all by themselves and talk to them. And kind of have almost like a world-ending finale of what that means. And because of that, and the hidden context in there that is for you to open the pages and flip through, I do think there's hope.
Okay, excellent. Well, so I don't know how many listeners will actually be at PAX this weekend, but if people are interested in purchasing the game or finding out other things that you or Imagining Games are doing, what are some places that they can look online? Or I
try to make it easy. If you go to imagininggames.com, at the bottom of every page, there's all the little social links. We basically have like a Facebook page, and we have an Instagram and such. Post something about it every week. I'll do a lot of convention shows, a lot of in-person things, but yeah, you try to not overload you, but at the same point, show you a little bit of what's going on, keep you in.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I hope that, on the one hand, I hope it continues to remain as busy as it has been. On the other hand, please look after yourself, because this
I know my voice, you maybe can't tell, but it's already going hoarse. It is a 3-day show. It's Friday. It's not even, it's like the afternoon, so.
Yeah. And here I'm dropping things as well. So I'm here at booth 4259 at World Champ Game Company talking with...
I am Ryan.
Thanks for taking the time. So I know it's a very busy day, just trying to pop in while there's a bit of breathing room. Can you tell us a little bit about the company and the games that you make?
Yeah, so World Champ Game Co. Is run by Adam Vass. Adam's not here this weekend. He's actually touring with his band in Australia. So he asked me, Ryan, to run the booth for him. Adam does a lot of, obviously, TTRPGs. That's why we're here, but uses a lot of emergent storytelling to try to tell like different styles of stories. People that know World Champ probably know Necronautilus the most. It's a very fun stoner metal game. But that's... I guess that's what I would say about World Champ. If you want games that are a little bit different, make you think a little bit more, that's what Adam shoots for.
Awesome. So the two in particular that caught my eye, I don't know, are you familiar with Changeling the Dreaming?
Yeah.
Okay. So because we're looking at games that are themed around dreams, imagination, the Fae, etc., there are two games on the table here behind me. One is called Babes in the Wood, and one is called Ever Dream This Man. So I know you said the first one is one that you can speak to a little bit more, but can you tell us a bit about one or both of these?
Yeah, so Babes in the Wood is a PBTA game. I personally describe it very much as if you've seen the movie Halloween Town, you will love Babes in the Wood. It is a PBTA powered by the Apocalypse game of basically you are kids kind of like lost in the forest trying to find your way out and helping the people of the forest and solving issues as you go. If you are a fan of PBTA, Kids on Bikes, that whole system, the kind of vibe of playing that, then Babes in the Wood is kind of the go-to for that.
Ooh. And I see that there's now an expansion or something for it.
Yeah, so there's an All Hallows Eve adventure. Again, Halloween themed. Obviously, Babes in the Wood is going to be very Halloween themed. For those that haven't seen the cover, it's a kid with a torch riding in a literal pumpkin pulled by a black cat. So if that doesn't give you Halloween, nothing really will. But there is an additional zine here for it, which is an adventure for Babes in the Wood. There are adventures and adventure seeds in the book itself, but the expansion just adds a little bit more to it as well.
And just because I don't know how many of our listeners have actually done PBTA games, is there anything you can say about the system that makes it distinctive?
So PBTA is more of a kind of storytelling game. I would say it's very much not OSR. It has a lot of narrative scaffolding to help have a more of a story as you go and have that story more mechanized. So it often uses things like pick lists and a mixed success, as its core system, so that nothing ever not happens, and the average result will always give you a result very much like yes and, as opposed to just pass fail. So that's what I would say about PBTA.
Excellent. So for the other one, Ever Dream This Man, is that under the same system as well, or is that like a wholly different?
No, so Ever Dream This Man is actually a hack of Anamnesis from Samantha Lee. If you are specifically looking at memories and dreams and things like that, I would say, check out Ever Dream This Man, but also very much check out Anamnesis. It's a great system from Sam. They do a lot of really interesting things with that, and I know it's become more widespread in the indie scene, especially for solo games and especially for having something that's a little bit different.
Okay. I just took note that it says on the front, a recurring nightmare in the form of a tabletop RPG, which is just maybe the best selling point I could offer to people. So, awesome. So if people are interested in these or other games that you produce, is there somewhere online they should look? Or
Yeah, you can find all of Adam's stuff at worldchamp.io. Everything that Adam produces, he makes, publishes, prints, does everything himself. Only, I think, Bloodborne, the newest one, is one of the only games where he actually uses a different illustrator, so most of the illustrations are his. Writing, layout, everything is all through that, and then he sells them all through his own website, as again, at worldchamp.io. And you'll be able to find everything that we have here today, plus a lot more there as well.
I'm always a little bit jealous of like unfairly multi-talented people, but then when they make interesting things which I can buy, I'm like, all right, I can forgive that.
No, it's not fair. It's a hack. If you're an artist that becomes a game designer that's not fair to the rest of us, then you need to just stop. But no, I completely agree. The fact that he's able to do the multimedia stuff he does, and again, on top of that, he's not here today because he's touring with his band, so like there's even more talent for Adam. So just a wonderful, awesome, talented person who makes really interesting emergent narrative games that are really fun to play and to read as well.
Yeah, splendid. All right, well, thank you so much, and good luck. Have an enjoyable rest of the con.
Thank you, you as well.
Okay, so I'm standing at booth number
2605.
You memorize that much more than most other booth people have, I think. But this is Osprey Games. Osprey or Osprey?
Osprey.
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 And I'm here chatting with Benji.
Hi.
So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the company?
Of course. So, my name's Benji. I've been working here at Osprey Games for just shy of 4 years. We are a British board game, card game, role-playing game, and war game company. So we have offices in the UK and in the US, which means that we can come to US shows, which is awesome.
Hooray!
Yeah, it's really, really good. I feel very, very fortunate that I get to turn my passion into something that connects with people for a living full time.
There's been kind of a theme talking about that today. Like both of the other interviews, people were like, "Oh, thank God, this is my job."
Yeah,
it's like, let's rub it in. That's fine. But
I work in marketing specifically because my job is about building bridges between people, and that is what I like doing as a human being. It resonates with me.
Excellent. So, on the subject of, well, I guess building bridges between games in this case. So, being here from Changeling, the podcast, the themes of Changeling particularly have to do with dreams, imagination, nightmares, fairy tales, etc. And my understanding is that you have 1, 2, possibly more games that might be of interest to our listeners.
Yes, we do.
So,
we do. So, released this year on our role-playing line, we have 2 games that are of interest to your listeners. In particular, the first one, which is my favourite of the 2, is Through the Hedgerow. We have this game that's basically a British folk horror game, which is set in a sort of fae realm that crosses through 4 different time periods. So the game has 4 different settings. So you play in sort of a Viking era, there's Victorian Britain, there's World War II. You play through these 4 settings, and you're basically trying to fight these fairies through time in a sort of Philip Pullman subtle knife kind of way. I might make a reference that might not resonate with some of your listeners. There is a kids' TV show from long time ago called Wurzel Gummidge, which is basically like a scarecrow who's been brought to life. And it's quite frightening. They recently in the UK did like a comeback of the show for Christmas. Our game kind of takes some of the aesthetic of that. So it's like animated scarecrows. It's got like tiny Victorian children running around with enormous spider creatures who are like wearing vaudevillian busts. Like it's wild. The aesthetic is it's quite something. So the other game that I'll talk about is The Terror Beneath, which is a much more dark game. It's much more horror inspired. It is our kind of take on the kind of Cthulhu stuff. It is not a Cthulhu game though. So all of the Lovecraftian worlds, a lot of that stuff, everyone gloms onto Lovecraft. There is also a writer called Arthur Machen. Arthur Machen was working on a kind of similar cosmic horror kind of thing. So he kind of ran parallel a little bit to Lovecraft. And our game, The Terror Beneath, is an Arthur Machen inspired horror game. So it's a role-playing game that basically takes the kind of cosmic horror and it brings it to kind of a folky kind of vibe. It has this very, very stark, dark, colourful aesthetic. So everything has this sort of, I've referred to it as like PlayStation 1 graphic style, but with like very bold pops of colour. It's beautiful. But the idea is you are a group of investigators who are going around trying to explore these like mysteries of the dark.
and in terms of like systems, is there anything about them that's distinctive with dice or structures, character sheets, anything like that?
So Terror Beneath uses Gumshoe, which is a system specifically designed for investigation. We've run that system through a few of our RPGs now, through Hard City and Tomorrow City. I'm a really big fan. I love GMing it. Gumshoe's a great system for getting your players to actually engage in a mystery and finding plot hooks and working your way through them. Rather than getting crunchy with dice, it's much more about getting involved with what your story is. It incentivizes you to actually engage with characters and make connections rather than how heavy is the sword in my bag. Like, no one needs that. In the detective game Hard City that I ran that used Gumshoe, I think we had a single combat in our entire campaign because our players were just so focused on actually asking questions and trying to like find out what was happening that actually very rarely gets down to the blood and guts. And when it matters, that makes it so much more impactful because one combat is a really big deal if it's the only combat you've ever had. It's really exciting. The Through the Hedgerow uses a checks and challenges system, which we haven't run before on our other games, but basically it has stats that you check against, and you're basically trying to set yourself up against specific challenges. So most of our games use different systems. We haven't really settled on one like a lot of role-playing game companies have. the reason for that is that we really like trying to be creative with stuff and bringing in designers who have a system that works for what their game is. So if we find a cool game, we want the system to suit that rather than saying, no, this has to be, D20 or whatever. Whatever fits, that's what fits for the designer.
So is there anything distinctive? I keep fixating on the hedgerow one because Lovecraftian horror isn't necessarily my thing.
Of course.
So in terms of like the going through time aspect, when it comes to, I guess, verisimilitude, is it like this is Earth through history, or is it like kind of an alternate sort of thing?
So the idea is that it is real history, but it's sort of both of those things. It's real history if, with a what if, portals were open through different realms. And as such, there are magical creatures who are between those realms who have, in our world, always been acting through the ages, but we don't necessarily know about it or know what that was. So they come in different forms, in different eras, but your group of heroes, they are specifically fighting because they know that is what's been weaving its tendrils through the different times.
So like secret history almost.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
I should also ask, are you doing supplements for one or both of these?
So that's actually a really good question. So we are specifically, I think this is the first I've told anybody, for Christmas, we are putting out a Christmas scenario for Through the Hedgerow. That is festive. I won't give much more else away about that, but is a full free scenario. We already have a free scenario that's on our site. We are making a point of putting all of our character sheets and everything as downloadable resources, and we're trying to get form fillables and sample characters as well. But ospreygames.co.uk has all the free downloads there, and importantly, we are making sure that we support all of our games with author blogs. So we have like design diaries with the influences, all the kind of media that pulled into what the books are, and also like world building guides and that kind of thing. So we're trying to support our authors as much as we can to give them the tools to connect with players.
That was going to be my last question, is where online can people find these?
Yes.
Because if they're interested. But anything else that you'd like to say about other games or other stuff or whatever else?
I guess an excellent thing to say is if any of your listeners are interested in contributing to us, we have an open submission policy. So if you head to our website and you look for the submission section, there's a guide there. We basically take games in all different forms. But if you have something interesting, please send it over to us. We are always looking for cool new things.
All right. Sounds great. Well, thank you so much. And hopefully we can send people your way this weekend.
Thank you very much. Nice to speak with you.
Cheers. All right, so I'm here at, is this 4109, the booth?
Yes.
I think? Okay, I'm so glad I got that right. And this is Nerdburger Games, and I'm here talking with Craig. Craig, how are you?
Hello, I'm good. How are you doing?
I mean, it's day one, and we'll see how it goes from here. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and Nerdburger Games?
Sure. My name's Craig Campbell. I'm the owner of Nerdburger Games, lead designer. We publish a whole variety of small press kind of indie RPGs, primarily, kind of all our own system developments and so forth. Just a big variety. I've done a fair bit of freelancing for other companies and everything. That's kind of dwindled off. Nerdburger Games is about 8 years old.
Okay. Well, that's 8 years longer than a lot of companies that try to start. So. And the game that I noticed in particular is Good Strong Hands, because I feel like it might be of interest to our listeners who are into Fae and folklore sort of themed stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about Good Strong Hands?
Sure. Good Strong Hands is sort of my homage to fantasy movies from the 80s. As the title might imply, it's borrows a lot from The Neverending Story, also Labyrinth, Willow, Legend, Dark Crystal, just the feel and of a lot of those types of things. Like nothing proprietary, obviously, but it's built around kind of those types of movies, where you are playing fantastical creatures who are working to save your world from destruction by this faceless, malevolent entity known as the Void.
Dum dum dum.
Dum dum dum. Yes, and it's built to be kind of a player-facing game. The GM doesn't roll any dice. They're focused entirely on kind of keeping the story moving and prompting questions to the players. The players are encouraged to help build and fill out the world. Anything that's not defined explicitly in the game book or by the GM at the table is open to the players to kind of interpret and build. The idea being that you are saving this world, and the players will feel more invested in that if they have helped to create this world. So they'll make it a little bit more theirs.
Seems reasonable. So you mentioned having kind of your own, I guess, distinctive systems or idiosyncratic systems with good, strong hands, like in terms of it being player involving, I guess I'll say. For someone who's unfamiliar with that kind of experience, what would you say, what tips would you give for people to like get involved in that style of role-playing? For people who are used to just rolling lots of dice.
Right. For this game, the game is not built to have a lot of rolling. You will roll dice to resolve some things, but it doesn't get into like D&D style combat where it's round by round and lots of rolling. And it's also built around the idea that you can overcome pretty much any challenge in the game through a variety of different means. And you can have people that are using different means at the same time. So if you're fighting, like this ogre, somebody could be physically fighting them. One character could be actually fighting with a weapon, and somebody else could be using their charm trait to taunt and keep the ogre off balance. And somebody could be using the mind trait to try to trick the ogre in some way, and outthink it, outsmart it. And you're whittling away at a certain number of successes you need in order to defeat the ogre in that challenge. And whoever gets that last success, they're the one who kind of decides, oh, did the person who was fighting them actually knock the ogre out? Did the person who was tricking them manage to trick them into submission, etc.? So you don't have to go into it expecting to have to play a combat god. You can have a character that's like, I'm just going to manipulate the thing, and just kind of apply my brains to anything that I come up against and help overcome that challenge that way.
Is there like a meta plot kind of thing, or is it just kind of a standalone book and players can kind of create their own sort of history of the world and everything? Or will there be supplements, I guess?
There's not really any meta plot. The way the game book is set up is that you've got rules and all the player stuff up front, and then you've got GM advice and how to run stories and so forth. And then like the last third of the book, rather than being a setting, in the traditional sense, it's a series of 2-page adventures, and each one of those 2-page adventures gives you a little bit of the setting, but it doesn't put anything in relationship to anything else. Like, you can build out the world the way you want it to be. This world and continent and everything can be what you wanted. In fact, there's a blank map double page in the middle. You can literally like create your map as you go, and you as a group decides, oh, this region is over here, and this mountain range is over there, and this city with this super tall tower is over here.
My last question was going to be, are there any other games in a similar vein that you wanted to mention? And I happened to glance down and just see these two beautiful covers in front of me for Secrets of the Vibrant Isle and Secrets of the Vibrant Sea. So the question still stands, but I also just want to know about these two.
Well, the Good Strong Hands game system is called the roll track system because you're making rolls and you're also tracking information in some checkboxes. And that system is used for Nowhereville, which is a small town horror game, as well as Code Warriors, which is sort of like a Tron meets Mad Max kind of thing. You're playing programs inside of the computer, but the computer is crashing, so it's the apocalypse.
Excellent.
So they use the same system and they function similarly like that. Secrets of the Vibrant Isle and the Secrets of the Vibrant Sea are solo games.
Okay.
You play by yourself. They play a little bit like Choose Your Own Adventures. In Secrets of the Vibrant Isle, your character is looking for this legendary island called the Vibrant Isle, and they shipwreck on it. And they have 28 in-game days to convince this mystical island that they should be allowed to stay, because the island doesn't just let anybody stay. So then you'll go about scavenging from your shipwreck, you'll explore the island, you'll eventually meet the inhabitants of the island, and eventually you'll undertake a quest to prove to the island that you're worthy of staying. And it's built for maximum replayability, where there's like 90 different encounters. You'll see different ones in different orders on different playthroughs. The inhabitants, you create them as you play, so every time you could have a completely different inhabitants community. And then Secrets of the Vibrant Sea can be played standalone unto itself, but it also functions as a sequel to Vibrant Isle. So you can take your character from the Vibrant Isle and then go out into the Vibrant Sea and explore the mystical ocean and deal with a threat there.
Seems like the kind of thing With like solo games, I've always been, oh no, I'd rather play with people. But I keep trying to think of contexts where I would play one, and I'm like, that sounds like a great way for like a plane ride to occupy yourself. And then the vibrancy could be for the flight home. Just like, anyway.
Yeah, you can do that. I've known people that have done it. Like they'll just do like a couple days, on island days, a couple days at a time, like at their lunch. Yeah. And they'll take a few weeks to play the whole thing. It was built purposefully to be like, you can just like play a little bit here, play a little bit there.
Yeah.
You could spread it out because there's so many of us that just don't have the time to get a group together. And even if you want to play something alone, like you don't necessarily have an hour or two that you can sit down and just dedicate to it. Like you could play it, a few game days a time during your lunch hour.
If only. Well, awesome, and thank you. And if anyone is interested in picking up these and other games, where should they look?
My website is nerdburgergames.com. I am Nerdburger Craig on various social medias. You can get the games on DriveThruRPG. Everything is there in PDF and print-on-demand form. But then some of the games, like Good Strong Hands in particular, and a couple of others are also available on the web store at my website, where there's like the fancier, nicer version of the game book. It's a print, a proper print run as opposed to a print-on-demand book.
I have to say, standing here looking at it is very beautiful. So
it is my prettiest game.
Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
So I'm here at the Rowan, Rook, and Deckard
Rowan, Rook, and
Deckard booth, talking with
Mara Leiden.
And we're here to talk about a few different RPGs, maybe, but in particular, the Die RPG, which is here in front of me. So I am a massive fan of the Die comic. I remember beta testing this when it was in the works and everything. When we did our episode on graphic novels and comics that are similar or inspirational for Changeling and Dreaming, we talked about this one. So, can you tell me a little bit about the role-playing game version of the Die worlds?
Oh my gosh. Well, the one thing that I really love about Die is that the rules they're not cribbed from anything else. They're completely their own creation. And I think it translates really well from the really specific story that the comics were telling to the general story that you can tell with your friends. There's a lot of room left in the mechanics for everyone to do their own kind of riffs and investigate their own kind of fallacies as they do in the specific characters of the comics.
That deep flaw that all characters have.
Yes, and that all people have, which is what the really scary part of this game.
So in the comics as well, the world, it's one of those things where you can tell that you're only scratching the surface of how deeply it goes. So with a game like this, is that something that you've delved into? Was that a challenge to kind of flesh out?
Absolutely. Well, there's a section in the end of the book on like how to make your own dodecahedron, like that's a 12-sided shape.
A icosahedron.
Icosahedron? I got you.
I think, yeah.
Hopefully. It's how to make the game personal to you and your group. And so I think that although all the art in the book is absolutely gorgeous, they use a lot of stuff from the comics, a lot of new art of the characters from the comics. But what I love about it is that it doesn't have anything to do with those characters. It is entirely your own creation.
Some of those characters were not people I would want to spend time with.
No. There's also a prelude in the book that is a comic of 4 or 5 pages that's brand new characters, delving into the system and making more space for more worlds and more people, which I think was really important for the system to do. But yeah, what I am really excited by in this book is that it is a technically system neutral. I think it's a really interesting concept that it's okay, well, there's Dungeons and Dragons, and the official books are set in Herein or whatever. This game and this comic makes so many very specific world-building demands, especially, for example, of the Neo. But the book basically does its best to separate that out from any specific setting.
Okay.
So it's well, in the comic, they go to the trenches and they go to this big city, and none of that is there in the book. It's here's how to make your own places that are going to impact your own players and their own characters.
So that's something I was going to say, is because in Changeling, I don't know how familiar you are with Changeling, but So the themes of things like imagination, dreams, alternate worlds,
Yeah.
all of that is very significant. And what strikes me about the Die RPG is how it approaches those things, but from a totally different angle.
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
But I am also curious about Spire and Royal Blood as
Yes.
two other games. Can
Yeah.
you tell a little bit about those?
So I haven't played Royal Blood. I am really, really excited for the new version that they just kickstarted. It's going to be really beautiful. It's going to come with its own tarot card set. But we have the rulebook here, and I own it, and I have read through it, and I have not played it.
Okay.
It is a game where you play a group of minor arcana from the Rider-Waite deck that are trying to heist the power of a major arcana. And various complications happen therein. It's
As
basically-
one might expect.
As one might expect. The major arcana are not pleased to be dethroned. And then Spire, which is my favorite game that they have ever published.
Oh,
I really love all the different kinds of stories you can tell in Spire.
and what's sort of the central conceit of that one?
So the elevator pitch is that you play as a group of dark elf revolutionaries attempting to overthrow the high elf government in a impossible mile-high city.
Okay.
In that, you can tell a story of revolution. You can tell a story of like religious oppression, of like a noir mystery or a gangster film. There are so many different versions of Spire that exist within the book itself. And then there's also all of the extra stuff. Like, for example, they did 2 maps of the upper city and the lower city. And there's a bunch of stuff on the maps that just isn't in the books. So there's like map canon and book canon, and the book contradicts itself.
So I'm admiring the wall art, which looks like Dark Elf Carmen Sandiego, and
Pretty
I'm
much,
super
yeah.
into that.
So this is the iconic art for our class, the Inksmith, which
Ah.
is literally an occult journalist with my favorite spell in the game, Man with a Gun.
See, that's the kind of stuff I love. Like, you had me at Inksmith.
Yes. There's a bunch of scenarios in the Shadow Operations book where you literally run a revolutionary printing press, and there's a stress track for the printing press, whether or not you get shut down by the cops.
Oh. And I see that, so I'm excited to see for Die, there are supplements now.
Yes.
Spire, I see there's some. Are these both games, and I guess Royal Blood as well, that you envision kind of continuing indefinitely? Do you have like a fixed run in mind?
So for Royal Blood specifically, the rules are going to be the same in the new edition. It's just going to be a nicer, fancier edition with its own deck.
Okay.
And so that's what the Kickstarter was. Very excited for some new merch that's coming out of that. But the rule book as it is currently completely playable. It's going to be the same.
And are there any other games from the company that you would point to that our listeners might be interested in that kind of touch on similar themes?
So there's always Heart, the City Beneath,
Ooh.
which is a sister game to Spire. It is almost done with a full-length campaign book that was successfully kickstarted last year. Should be going into production sometime in 2025, or shipping out anyway, called Dagger in the Heart,
Okay.
where you are trying to take over a machine that is trying to take over the heart. Heart is our cosmic horror dungeon delve,
Ah.
where the dungeon itself conforms to your dreams and wishes in the worst and most horrific way possible.
That I think is absolutely in line with the Changeling sort of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as much as I love Spire, and it is very reality bending, if you're looking for something really far out there, you want to go into the Heart, which is located directly beneath the city of Spire. They actually share some source books and classes, like the
Ooh.
Blood Witch.
Okay.
The Blood Witch is infected with a virus of unreality. And in Heart, they are some kind of like evil fae, like court that are very highly valued for their medicinal skills.
Okay.
In Spire, they're abominations that should be hunted down and destroyed because they wear personhood like a mask.
I mean, I love all of these words in the order that they're in. So. We'd also be remiss if we didn't mention the glory that is Honey Heist. But,
Oh, always, yes.
Speaks for itself.
You know, if you go to Grant Howitt's, he's got an itch.io page. He also has a Patreon. He is still putting out those one-page RPGs.
Perfect.
And they are all fantastic in their own special ways.
Well, this leads me to my last question, which is for people who aren't able to attend the convention but interested in these games, where can or should they go to pick some of them up?
They have a wonderful website, rowanrookanddecker.com. All of the books most of the books are on there, and that is the place to go if you want to be updated when Heart restocks as soon as possible.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.